Asteroid of fear.
Curious about the evolving world of podcasting and fatherhood? Join us for an engaging conversation with Scottie G as we dive into a year's worth of experiences, challenges, and triumphs. This episode is much more than just a catch-up. It's a dialogue between two entrepreneurial fathers navigating the complexities of life, from raising kids to harnessing AI in our projects. Discover how we prioritize adding value and being of service, while also carving out time for self-care and choosing the path of entrepreneurship over traditional corporate roles. Even though we text daily, nothing beats the intimacy of face-to-face conversation, albeit virtually. Don't miss this insightful exchange that promises to inspire and motivate you on your own journey. So, here we go. Dongled. So my new setup, as opposed to having my desk, is I have my desk is over here, and then I have my Mac dongled to a TV that's in front of me.
Nice.
And yeah, this was kind of the setup I was wanting. And now that I came back from Buck, I actually have the opportunity to get it. So let's see that lighting.
Can you not see me?
Now I can see you. Yeah,
Okay.
There you go. Hold on. Let me try something real quick. But the other part of that is there you go. When I undo it full screen, now I can see. There's this thing where kind of what happens is if I full screened it, it cut you out. But alrighty. All right. Oh, my Uncle Laser shirt on.
Who is Uncle Laser?
Really? You don't know who Uncle Laser is? Oh my goodness.
I know you're shocked, but yeah, I do not.
He is an Austin comedian. And
Oh, okay, that's
he is
cool.
funny as fuck, dude.
Yeah.
I think he's a Texas boy, probably sound like maybe, I don't know, maybe Houston area. And then worked in the oil fields, and I don't know if he started doing comedy or he got it. He did the whole Kill Tony. And I think
Oh.
through Kill Tony, he fucking maybe blew up. But dude, he is call him like White Lightning. Definitely Texas cowboy, but not all cowboy kind of flair, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like probably like a sleeveless cut off brush popper with some boots and probably like a lightning bolt chain earring with a blonde mullet. And
So like an Austin cowboy.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Dude, he's funny. I highly recommend if you
I'll
have
to
a
check that
chance
out.
to see him, you do so. But yeah, so I have actually a few little things. Let me put my glasses on. But I'll just start off with like, hey, welcome to the Men of the House. And I just got kind of like brief bullet points. And I also did a little let me see here. Oh, I even asked Chat GPT. I said, where'd I go? I go, generate some podcast interview questions for the Men of the House podcast hosting Just Be with Scottie G. And it starts off, Chat GPT goes, let's go. Having Just Be with Scottie G on the Men of the House podcast is a great move. Here's a solid lineup of interview questions that blend depth, authenticity, and that men holding it down energy your audience will vibe with. And it goes, theme, authenticity, growth, and living unapologetically. I was like, huh. Like I'm kind of getting into this Chat GPT a little bit in terms of I was using it to build a site with Bluehost, but here lately, I don't know whether it's through prompts or whatever, but just seeing kind of how it works, I guess you could say, like to go, does Chat GPT scour the internet for Scottie G and bring in everything that it knows about you and then everything that it knows about me? And which is part of the reason I did it, because I'm not explaining to Chat GPT my podcast or your podcast, the theme, the elements, yet it somehow knows and brings it up. So I find it pretty interesting.
I'll do you one better. So I was doing a special episode of my podcast here in the garage because I do that mixtape therapy, right, with the
Yeah.
therapist. And so I copy and pasted links to the two episodes out of my podcast, and I go, "Do you know these episodes?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, these are da da da," and it broke it down or whatever. And so I go, from these two episodes of my podcast, can you come up with three questions for Hannah and then three questions for me to ask each other
Yeah.
on each episode? And it did the transcript of the episode and came up with questions that were came up out of that episode that I don't know if we could really have like come up with ourselves, like,
Right.
like looking at it externally. And of course, we kind of altered the questions a little bit and it went off on tangents and stuff. And we didn't use all the questions, but man, it was pretty cool how it went through my episode, got the theme and the vibe,
Yeah.
and was able to go like, hey, you should ask these questions based on what happened in that episode. That's wild.
I love it. Well, and last year whenever um it was probably after I met you maybe. There was some point in time I came across Writer by Google, RYTR, I think. And it has like categories and you can say like video description. And like for my solo episodes when I was with Buck, I'd be like, "Hey, I talked about this today," and you hit generate write and it will write out a description from just concept ideas in your head. Um and so
Well,
I
so check. So when I do episodes online, like for mixtape therapy,
uh-huh.
I turn on the AI recorder on the Zoom call, and then that's what I feed back into AI, and I go summarize this for a podcast. So it's the actual transcript of the podcast. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I've done some of that too where I took something that was generated and then threw it into Writer
Hmm.
and kind of see what it popped out. But yeah, I don't, man, I'm trying to think of of what I thought about AI in the beginning and maybe how it was explained, and did I have any thoughts on it, and then kind of, you know, easing your way into it, like the equivalent of a maybe you take a shot or drink a beer or smoke a joint for the first time. You're like, oh, let's try this out. And then whenever I started taking that course on building a website, it is done using ChatGPT prompts. And so then I became a little more familiar with it in that capacity. And then I was like, oh, now I'm going to start using it in other capacities. And I feel like here lately, I would use it for very kind of very specific things that I was looking for. But it almost seems lately like when I fed in for questions for you, it was just more like a trial. Like I just want to see what it does and see
Well,
kind of how
here's the
powerful
other
it is.
thing. It's learning who you are. So if you go into ChatGPT and you prompt it, go tell me about myself based on what I told you, it'll start telling you stuff about yourself. That's wild.
Yes, because I saw a post today on for a coach who did that. He's like, Chat GPT, tell me about myself, and it spit out like who he was, what he's about, and all that stuff. And I was sitting there going like, what did you feed that? But now when you just said that hey, it's becoming intuitive off what you input
Oh yeah.
and it learns you. And I'm like, holy shit. But does that mean like, so because I'm an all Mac guy, so I have my MacBook here, my iMac over here, and my phone and ChatGPT is on all of them, and it streamlines across, of course. But you know, what if I came over to your house and started putting my ChatGPT shit into your ChatGPT? And
Well,
I
I think
wonder,
it does it. Well, I think it does it under your account. So, like, whatever your emails
right.
attached to it,
But what
that's
if I did it under your account? Would it like double helix AI some weird shit if I started putting in what I would prompt under somebody else's account?
well, I wonder if at some point it would know you well enough that you could prompt it to say, "Hey, if this doesn't sound like me, I want you to question who it is and ask me for this password," or
Oh.
something nuts like that. You know what I mean? Because like, I I've been watching these old documentaries like on
Uh-huh.
the 70s and 80s and 90s and stuff on the CNN documentaries, right? And they're at the one that was at the tech boom when the computer first came in. And there's a lot of similarities between the beginning of AI and the beginning of us having personal computers because in the beginning we didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
We knew we wanted them and we knew they did things, but we didn't know what to do.
They were
And
probably
it
more
took
like data storage.
yeah, it was more like charts and graphs and things like that, but like it took off like very quickly. And before you knew it, you know what I mean? It's like they were figuring out stuff to do with it, and I think that's kind of what's happening now.
Well, speaking of AI, to the audience out there, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast, and we are running it back a second time with Scottie G from Just Be with Scottie G, and be authentic. They'll adjust. Words to live by, definitely 100% for me. Always reminding me to be myself and try not to be insecure. But yes, we're back for a second time, and as you've heard, we've been talking about AI and all the things that have gone on. But if you haven't heard our first episode, please go back and listen to that. We recorded last year, almost same time, about 1 month shy, and we're going to take it back for a second run and kind of see what's happened over the past year, how have things changed, what's going on for the future, and because it doesn't really seem like it's been a year. It seems like it's kind of been long and short all at the same time in a weird sort of way.
Are you asking me?
Does it feel that way to you?
It's not, I don't know. I don't know if it's fair to ask me because I think me having a child at the age I'm at and the age she's at, like it's like a blur right now. So I'm the wrong person to ask, I
How
think.
old is she?
She's uh she's 4 going to be 5.
Yeah, that's about what I was thinking. So my daughter's 11, and I keep getting all these on this day type memories, and popping up and seeing her years younger. But yes, that stage definitely is interesting
You
and
just made me
fun.
think of something I've never thought of before. Like I don't get those because we don't put pictures of her online, right?
Yeah,
And so there is no memories online. There's no record of it like online. So like, whereas like a lot of parents might get like,
yeah,
oh, like 5 years ago, look, y'all are at Walt Disney World. Like I don't ever get that stuff. That's weird a little bit.
yeah, yeah. It is, and I don't know. And one of the things, like I think I was thinking about this. I don't know when I was thinking about our interview and thinking about how we're both fathers and whatnot, and I just had this thought of, I think I was listening to an episode and you were talking about your daughter. That's what it was. And I was like, man, my daughter at 11, getting ready, finishing up fifth grade, going into junior high next year. Um, she's in this stage that she, wow, I don't know. She understands more. She can conversate. Um, not becoming an adult, but becoming just more full as a person, growing up. And it's so
It's
cool.
amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah,
That's so
it's just,
fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, when they're that age, like at 4, this is what you're thinking about. You're like, man, one day I'm going to grow up. She's going to grow up and, she's like my little best friend. And you're like, um, you wonder like what kind of things will I be able to talk to her about? What kind of conversations will we be able to have? What is she going to ask me? And they start, I think as children, yes, they're developing into themselves. But now I'm starting to get that glimpse of, you know, who she kind of really is in a way. Her own kind of opinions and thoughts, not necessarily what's just been input from the outside world. And sometimes it's like these little moments, like today when I picked her up from school and we're driving back, and I don't know, she says something to me because a lot of times I'll be listening to a podcast or sometimes I have headphones in, but when she takes her little AirPod out to tell me something and laughs and she thinks it's funny, and I'm like pals, and I'm like, that's just the best. That's like, if I could be like in that state forever, um, it's probably like the first time you fall in love and, you're sharing a bed with a significant other and you're like holding them and you're like, man, I could be like this forever. Um, that's definitely how I feel with my daughter, 100%. But I love those moments as a father. And, one of the things that being a podcaster, doing odd jobs that aren't traditional by nature, is that I get this time. I get to take her to school. I get to pick her up. I get to have these moments and not be pressed by the clock or a boss or someone else breathing down my neck.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So, what what have you been up to over the past year? Last time we talked, aging specialist, podcasting, and just trying to keep this going. Kind of, what has anything new transpired? Are you going in a different direction? Has anything kind of tightened up, loosened up? Are you doing more life coaching, more training? Where are you allocating your time at the moment, like since we last talked?
I well, I think since we last talked, you know, I really wanted to lean a lot into my coaching. I felt like I had a lot of value to bring in that area, but I didn't realize at the time that I was kind of discrediting what I'd been doing for 15 years, like, prior to trying to like kind of, do more of a like aging thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized the most important thing that I can do for my clients in a unique way that we go about things is, excuse me, is the way I show up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I show up to do whatever we're kind of going to do that day. You know what I mean? And that really depends on the client and where they're at and how aware they are of what's going on and how much they're willing to share and allow me to bring awareness to, right? And so,
Right.
um, you know, um, and so it was kind of a mind shift of going like, okay, let's not just like throw away or discredit what you did for like a really long time. How can I maximize that along with maximizing all the new tools that I'm learning and all the new things I'm learning and all the books that I'm reading and everything I'm learning from like doing the podcast and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so it just became more evident that like, you know, there's a lot of people that do probably what I do. They call it something different. This is just what
Right.
I call it, but this is just how I do it. And it works really well for my clients. My clients love working with me. I love working with them. And, I'm not going to be it sounds so when you go like, "Hey, I'm not for everybody." I don't mean that in a like an aggressive, mean, fuck off kind of way.
Yeah.
I mean it in a way of like I'm hoping to attract the people that think that what I do will bring the best out of them because that's what I want to do, you know?
Yeah. Add value. I mean, to me, I feel like at the end of the day, anything I do, everything I do, I mean, adding value is kind of the key. Just kind of like winning. I mean, I would say, yes, I like to win. Um, I play to win versus playing not to lose. But even if we're playing tic tac toe, of course I want to win. Um, but I kind of feel the same way as it relates to that is, no matter what it is, I hope to be adding value as opposed to sucking value out of it. Or, you know, you don't want to be that kind of person, I guess. But with now with your coaching, is it mostly, well, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like going off of what you said before. Are you, is it more like blending the coaching with the fitness to make like kind of a one wholesome type of thing as opposed to maybe earlier, what it sounded like to me, and I could be wrong, was like you felt like, hey, this was separate from this, but as opposed to maybe incorporating it and going, wellness is a whole thing, because last time we talked about your older client who was in his 90s, and then me just coming off of the stint with Buck who was in his 90s, seeing that, I learned a lot about physical health, because he could not ambulate and get out of bed on his own and whatnot at all. And, he had good and bad mental days. But looking at from a point of view of saying he made it to 97, but it's all the stuff he did all the years before, which led him to 97 and that quality of life. And, so for me, I realized that, at 48 years old, a lot of people look at fitness and they think aesthetics, or they want aesthetics to be the byproduct of the exercise. And at 48 and having taken care of a 97-year-old, I feel like aesthetics is really the last, and longevity and mobility, because, he was immobile due to falls. And that can be due to balance, it can be due to all kinds of things. And so when you were talking about that, that's what it sounded like a little bit to me, was maybe you felt like they were separate and you were really trying to bring everything together in that kind of manner of thinking of, what is it they need that day. But sometimes it is exercise, and sometimes it's words, and sometimes it could be something else.
Well, I I realized that I've been coaching a lot longer than I thought I had.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, I wanted to market it in this separate way of like I can do these things and they don't have to be attached. But what I really realize is that like that's what I do. Like that is what I do, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
as much as I want to be this other thing, this is kind of what I do with my clients. So like as an example, like I have a guy I work with, like I see him on Mondays, and he says this all the time, and I'm so grateful for him. But he always goes, I like starting my Mondays off with you because I get to unload anything that like happened over the weekend, and he like we'll go through this kind of body prep stuff, and we might talk about some things, and then we plan about the week and what he's got to do, and and so this coaching is happening inside this physical exercise. So I feel like even sometimes like people don't even realize they're being coached.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because there's this whole other thing going on, and so and that's like when I work with athletes, it's a lot of that. You know what I mean? Because I'm not there really to shape what they do in their sport. I'm just there to mentally support kind of like what's going on. You know what I mean? So the role's similar, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I do know that. Sometimes it's almost like a security blanket in a way, because I have a coach, and but it's just that.
I don't. I'm not. I don't mean to like. I get what you say about security blanket, but like
Yeah.
I like to think of it more of as like more like a heated blanket, more like an electric blanket,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Like you can do your own blanket, you could stay warm, but there's this element that it helps keep you a little warmer. You know what I mean? It's just like
Yeah.
it's like an assistant to what you already have because I don't really, you know, the best thing my clients can do is take responsibility and do these things for themselves. Like, you know what I mean? If you're depending on me to come up with the answers, then I'm not doing my job,
Right.
So, you know, we can sit and talk through it and I can give ideas and we can come to things that maybe you're comfortable with or you can try.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, when I go to bed, like, I mean, it's not, that sounds so rude to go as, hey, it's not my problem. But like, it is not my problem to solve. Like, I have my own problems to solve. And that's why I do the same thing in my life that I'm coaching
Right.
you to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh man. Um, that's so funny. I love that. But it's true. It's like, hey, you know, uh,
But
I'm
if I'm
human.
if I'm worried about Richard's problems, then
Yeah.
who's worried about my problems?
Yeah. No. one
and
hundred
and, and
percent.
then that ultimately that frees up Richard to possibly worry about somebody else's problems. And then now we got this like site, you know what I mean? And that happens a lot in like really close relationships, you know what I mean? Where people they're not responsible for their
Yeah.
own stuff. And sometimes that's really hard, man. It's hard to be responsible for these things that aren't very becoming of who we are, but like it's important, you know what I mean? And hey, don't do things that you don't want to be responsible for. That you could also do that.
Yeah. 100% on that. I mean, I know for me lately, the word no has been the most powerful thing for me. Um, and it's been hard to say at times, but man, I just felt like I had to, you know, even though I'm a server, I come from a place of service. My heart is to serve. I I was at a place where I had to serve myself. Um, and I'm glad I did. I mean, I know it was the right choice. It took a couple of weeks to not necessarily, I wouldn't say get over the guilt, but um, yeah, you know, sometimes,
Well, like I look at it like this. Like I'm a server as well. Like, it's hard for me to like say no, but if I do the things that take care of me, that make me the best version of myself, I get to say yes a lot more because I have a lot more space for the people that are important to me, right? And that is my responsibility. And if I'm saying no, it's because not only do I not have the space, but I can't because I need to take care of myself. You know what I mean?
yeah. Speaking of, what 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 have you learned? What have you learned about yourself this past year since we last talked through podcasting? What has podcasting taught you about yourself?
Well, over this last year, I celebrated my 100th episode.
Awesome.
Yay.
Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, and I remember that was my initial goal. That was the goal I set for myself. And I took the long road, like I didn't try to rush it or anything. I
Right.
I did a pace I could maintain, and I think that for at least for me that was really important because because it made it like suck. at certain time. Like it really just would suck. Like it would just be like, oh, like I don't want to record this podcast. I don't want to edit. I don't want to do a monologue. I don't, and like I needed to like go through that
Yeah.
with it. And now it's so much a system of what I do. Like it's all the systems are like in place that like in this weird way it runs on its own. So I look for other avenues to expand like what I'm
Yeah.
doing, like doing this other podcast that I do with Hannah, or me and Hannah are kind of currently working on a book that might
Oh,
turn into this whole like toury thing. Anyways, the point is that now that this is kind of rolling and I have it, and I have it this pace I can maintain, and like I don't need it to make money or anything. Like I just have it. Like it allows me to just find ways to be more expressive, more helpful, reach out to people more. Like I don't know. It's really it's grown me as a person because it really has made me truly understand not only the value of time,
mm-hmm.
but how much time that we truly waste. That's what I really think has probably taught me because of this last grind to the 100 episodes.
You know what? I feel kind of the same way.
Yeah, I think it's pretty normal. I think this is a
Yeah.
very, but I just think when these things happen, like when they get to, I don't know, season 3, episode 75, 71,
Yeah.
they're just like, you know what? I just don't want to do this anymore. And I feel that. I feel that, but like, you got to keep like it's like when you go down, sit down to bench press and you say, I'm going to do 10 reps. Well, how many reps are you going to do? Are you going to do 10? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, are you going to get to like 9? You're like, nah, I don't feel like it. It's the promises that you make to yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I had mine on a system as well. And, and then I braked for a little bit. But when you have it on the system and it kind of runs on its own, um, it really hit me when you said like time wasting, because when I was taking care of Buck as a 24/7 live-in caregiver, releasing 2 episodes a week, trying to taking life certification courses and trying to build a website and preparing for a 20-mile march, you're like, I was on it and I had it going and I had a system in place, um and it was so weird because before that I had more time, and when I was with Buck it crunched my time, but I actually got more done, which was so weird. Um and probably because I was wasting time, but then I think I was just also a little more focused. And I think, I took that little bit of a break, and now that I'm back, it's going back to the 2 times a week and getting that system rolling where it's rolling on its own. And that's kind of where I'm getting back to and trying to enjoy. But when you said something, we were talking about, you're like, sometimes you just don't want to sit down and record. And I definitely kind of got that a little bit when I was doing more solo episodes, because I just couldn't rely on consistent times for interviews with Buck because I never knew what he would need. Um, and, but it's been the same way. I felt like I actually had a hard time wanting to go back into interviewing. But then I had an interview last week, my first one back, after 6 months, and it was just fantabulous. And it's the same way of getting the chance to spend time with you this evening. Um, it's like I get kind of nervous, and part of me is like, no, and and maybe I isolate a little bit, almost like to myself, and then I'm like, no, 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 don't do that. And you almost get to where you want to talk yourself out of it, like, no, I don't record. Maybe I really don't even want a podcast. Why am I even doing this? And then I'm like, I have the conversation with somebody and it's magical and I enjoy it, and I'm like, yes, you are a social creature. You do like people. You love people. You love good people. You just hate assholes, kind of. But it's that's the thing is, once I feel like even sometimes when I don't want to, even if it's a solo, once I get in front of the mic and just let it go, I feel good about it. And I feel like it's kind of within the past year been woven into the fabric of my identity. And that I felt when I took a little break and I was considering transitioning to a different kind of business and podcast plan, it just didn't feel right when I wasn't podcasting. And I felt like I almost got in that cycle of, will I ever go back? Maybe I don't want to. I don't know. But not true. Do you go through anything like that, or do, and part of that was I actually had this on the outline questions that I had was, um, you know, do you enjoy hosting, guesting, both? And is it something like me having this opportunity to talk to Ryan last week and now talk to you? That's what kind of keeps me going and gets me over that hump of the I don't want to, or sometimes when it's a pain in the ass. Does that ring true for you, or how do you view that?
Well, I think, I do like probably like 90% of my podcast in person,
Yeah, I
in
know.
here in the studio, right? So
Man,
it's next level
it's an
when you
excuse for
wake.
you to hang out with your friends and not go anywhere. I just listened to
Oh
that
yeah.
episode. I'm like, you got it.
I was just thinking about that the other day. I was like, man, I have like, cause I love, I love sneakers, obviously,
Yeah.
right? I'm a big sneaker collector, and I was like, wow, I have like all these shoes, and I wear them out, but it's just out into the garage. That's as far as they go, you know.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I don't know. I was thinking about this too the other day, like that I used to get nerves. Like I used, like especially when
Hmm.
I would invite strangers to the house because like I don't know who, if I could make them mad. Like this is in
Right.
person. How is this gonna go? Like what if someone gets upset? Like what if you don't know. Like what
Yeah.
if somebody's nuts?
Hmm.
I mean, like you just never know. And so I would have all these like really great conversations and interactions, and it just made me realize just the importance of like, this is really weird, just the importance of like being nice. Just like when people come over, that like hey, like my whole family kind of greets them a lot of time, if they're
Yeah.
here, like, and they come in and we eat and we talk, and like I might not know this person at all, and we're already kind of sharing a meal. And it's just been such a cool like experience. And I remember, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but I was talking to Joe, my camera guy, and he was like, "Look, man, if you're gonna get this podcast pumping out, you can't be like doing this whole dinner thing." And I was just like, "But it's like that's that's what it is, though.
Yeah.
That's a big part of like what I kind of started, and it seems corny, but." I don't know if a corny is the right word, but it seems like, well, why aren't you just doing a podcast or whatever? But like, man, like you would you'd be
It's an
shocked how
experience.
much. Well, yeah, it's an experience, and you'd be shocked how far it goes to get somebody their favorite foods and favorite drinks and favorite snacks, and say like, hey, this is your day. You know what I mean? This is your day. This is your time to shine. Person that's never been on a podcast before, like, this is what I want. I want my podcast to always be everyone's favorite podcast they've ever done, not
Hmm.
because of like necessarily what was said, but just how they felt when they were here and how they felt when they walked away from it.
Yeah. It's
I don't even know if I answered your question. I don't remember what the question was. I don't
oh
even know if I came close.
yeah. It was about those conversations, and it made me think of having. I think one of the differences, I find myself, one of the reasons I think I find myself definitely enjoying the conversations a lot is, you know, unlike you, when I got laid off, I wasn't out in public a lot, and I don't have clients that I'm meeting up with or anything. And so, when I was Ubering, that was kind of my opportunity to be out and kind of be social, I guess, if you will. Because, there's people who go to your normal 8-hour jobs, they get to be social with everybody in their office. If you're kind of an entrepreneur, um, it's relegated to either friends, your circle, people you do business with, et cetera, et cetera. And with me, you know, Ubering, you get, the customer, maybe the host or hostess. Um, Outside of that, I would definitely make it a point always to try to be nice. And, what if that hostess or whoever brings me the food that I'm picking up for, what if I'm the one smile, one cool person they get to meet for the day, because you work in restaurants, it's not always easy. And,
Yeah.
so I always would keep that in mind. But since I haven't been Ubering as much, and then when I was with Buck, it was kind of isolating because I was required to be there. And, I had noticed that over the past, because summer's coming up, I'm going to start Ubering again, since Buck passed away. And so it's like, I know I need to be social and get out there. Um, and that I can isolate, and that can be a problem for me. And I can almost be comfortable isolating sometimes, and partially because I'm an only child. But that's kind of one of the things I definitely realized too, in terms of, um, because I'm comfortable doing solo podcasts, but I enjoy the guests. And when I was doing more before I took on Buck, and I was interviewing, man, probably almost daily before that. And I try to think back, and I try to think of where my health, mental health, happiness, and all that was during that time, having more connection with people, I guess you could say. Um, and that's kind of where I'm trying to get back to now, is because I definitely felt like there was a little time shift even after Buck, that we got all these other clients and things were going on, and um, felt a little isolating, you know? And then the
Yeah.
cold weather and all that. But, that's kind of the thing with you, having the studio and having people to be able to come down, you get that interaction. And I was just thinking about, you know, connectedness, love. Those are the things that are everything. Those are the answers, um, to all the things we fight about, to all the problems. But yeah, I don't know. That was a little tangent off of a thought of that. Um, but that's that whole kind of corporate entrepreneur type thing, and something I'd been thinking about. And, you being an entrepreneur, I worked as a trainer as well. And working as a trainer, you're kind of like an entrepreneur. You're making some of it, you are your brand. But if you're working for a gym, they get their cut and all that. And I was thinking, taking like having a job versus being an entrepreneur, there's this idea that the human body, like, it likes to run efficiently. Efficiency is important in mind and body. And I was thinking, in trying to podcast, coach, be an entrepreneur, that what makes it kind of hard is, I mean, if your body and mind crave the path of least resistance, then of course, there's these times when I go, oh, should I go back to corporate? Well, yeah, it's easy to go to a place and they tell you exactly what to do and how long to do it and all that, versus when you're trying to do your own thing that is more fulfilling. um, you have to hustle, and you have to get out there, and you have to do things maybe you normally wouldn't do. And I think we need both entrepreneurs, and I think we need people in the machine. Um, but I wonder if that's why more people don't choose entrepreneurship. And what do you find challenging about being an entrepreneur, and do you like it versus when you worked maybe more corporate or restaurant or like 24-hour fitness type jobs?
I think that, I I worked at a I worked at a grocery store.
Well,
I
HEB?
worked at my no, it was Safeway. anyways, but I worked at McDonald's for 2 weeks,
Hmm.
and then I worked at a Safeway for like 3 months. And I'd worked for my dad on a farm for like a really most of my childhood, from the time I was probably like 12 until I could actually like get a job. And so then like once like I could wait tables, like it was on. Like, once I could make my own money and dictate that, it was on. And so waiting tables really translated really well into like being a personal trainer.
Hmm.
And like once I realized that, like, I don't want to say I didn't need the corporate gym, but they weren't really like, one, it wasn't allowing me to do my job at the level I wanted to do and the way I wanted to take care of my clients and the way I wanted to show up.
Right.
And so, I guess a lot of people either find that inside of their corporate job, or they're just okay with it, or they find it somewhere else. But like I wanted to really take care of my clients. And so that's why I ended up going into independent, is because I was like, not only will I be able to take care of them, but I'll get the total amount of money. But in being a manager for 24 Hour Fitness, I saw a lot of trainers quit and try that and not succeed because they weren't ready. They need somebody to hold them accountable. They thought they could find their own clients. They thought their clients would follow them,
Well, that's what you're
whatever else.
getting, I guess, like at the 24-hour, you're not having to go out and hustle because they're established and people are walking in all day. Because I was a trainer at Gold, so
Yeah, I mean it's like that at every big box gym, and
yeah.
right. And so I mean, when I think about like that journey,
Hmm.
I still have clients that, like, I have clients I've had for over 15 years
That's
that
awesome.
have made this full transition into what I do now. Like, do you know what I mean? Like that's kind of wild, because will say that when I started training them, I'd have been training for maybe 3 or 4 years, because I came from
Yeah.
Houston to the Austin area, right? And so, they have transitioned with me like through this journey, and I've lost a ton of clients along the way too.
Yeah.
I think that was you know, the big thing in being your own boss or being an entrepreneur is that you are responsible for everything.
Yeah.
Like, there is nobody else responsible. There's nobody gonna get you up in the morning. There's nobody gonna get you go to bed at
Do you
night.
like
There's
that?
What's that?
Do you like that?
I don't need it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm I'm
Well,
totally responsible.
like for me,
Yeah.
what I say is, um, I trust I trust my decisions. I trust me. Um, when I worked in corporate environments, sometimes things happen and you're like, what in the fuck? Why? What in the world? What the fuck on earth? And
I have that conversation a lot with my clients, because they'll tell me about stuff that's going on at their job, and I'm like, I don't understand that. That's crazy.
yeah. And
You
it's
know, you
like,
know what I mean?
you know
Why?
what? I don't want to march to any, I don't want to follow anybody's else's unlawful orders or their dumbass plan or, because there's always somebody sitting in an office somewhere. Their job is to figure out who uses the most fucking paper at this printer and that we're going to put codes on it. Yet we're going to fucking post the codes right there so everybody can see it. And they're going to use the easiest one. And whoever's going to buy the fucking paper anyway. So who cares what department it comes from? Cut that fucking guy out. Get Elon Musk on him. Doge his ass out because we don't need to know. um, yeah, it's like because corporations make decisions like that. They hire that person. Somebody invented this job description. They said we need a job that determines this. Here's the description, and we're gonna fucking pay them three times as much as the person on the front line. It's like what in the actual fuck? And that's kind of where I don't know. The for me, it's only been years. I've thought about it for a long time and wanting to do it, but just never did it. But it was like after being laid off, searching for jobs, turning some down. It's like, I don't know. I trust me, and every time I want to go back to something, it's just super hard. Like I need to be able to choose. Like with caregiving, I was able to choose. And I had some clients that I had to say no to. I helped them out for about 3 weeks, getting up at 4 in the morning, but it was a lot for me. And, you know, being able to set your own boundaries and not have other people dictate it to me, um, and then trust my own decisions was the most important part for me. But, I'm in the beginning and you've been doing this for years, so I certainly find it challenging to say the least at times. But how did you were there ever any times you considered, like when you were transitioning out of like management corporate into doing more independent your own thing, were there ever any times that you considered giving up? And if so, what got you through it, or what ultimately was like, nah, I got to do me. I got to be me.
You you can do and be whatever you want. You just have to accept everything that comes along with it. So, you know, to do the things that I do, I have to accept the challenges that come along with that and be cool with that. And I think a lot of the times the problem is like, you have this corporate job and you make a really good money. You make a lot
Yeah.
of money, but it comes with a lot of other shit
Hmm.
that I'm not willing to put up with, right? I'll take less money to do less of that. And I'm cool with that, but a lot of people aren't cool
Yeah.
with that. And I
Yeah.
think that's you have to come, that is your choice, your journey, your decision. That you have to come to that and nobody else can tell you what that is. And the only reason I say that is because, you know, I'm sure there's a good portion of people that don't choose to be homeless, right? And a
Yeah.
good portion of people that probably have mental illnesses around homelessness, but they're probably inside of that group because there's all kinds inside of groups. There are people that like are actively choosing the lifestyle of like just kind of getting by like that because they're okay with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And who am I to tell them that they have to live their life another way? It sucks. Like I would hope that they would want more, but maybe they don't. I mean, because
No.
we see people all the time living barely among above the
Yeah.
minimum line. You know what I mean? Like they have a home,
Well,
but they don't take care of it or whatever else it is. You know.
I can tell you something shocking. Sort of. Maybe. Maybe not. Um, you know, there are times when my mental health is close to cracking, and when that happens, I mean, I have those thoughts of like going like, I could be homeless. I mean, like by choice, kind of like what you're saying, not like wouldn't have anywhere to be, nowhere to go. You could hustle enough money for a Planet Fitness membership, take your showers there, sit under a tree, read the book, go to the library. There's all kinds of stuff you could do. Um,
So right now I'm reading the book Walden by Henry Thoreau.
mm-hmm,
Okay, and so this cat he went out to a pond with a house for two years and 2 months and just sat out there and did nothing and just made enough money or whatever he did to like get food and that was it. He just did it for 2 years. That's all, and he wrote this book, right? Or wrote about it, I guess,
mm-hmm.
right? Minus he had a home, he was kind of just being homeless,
Well,
you know.
so my thing, and like I've just had a lot of thought about this lately, is that, you know, not wanting or needing much, and that, to be homeless, like if you're okay sleeping outside when it's decently warm or wherever and reading a book or whatever, doing that hustle, then hey, but it's like to not want and not need a lot, I think, and that's me. Like I don't yes, it would be nice to have XYZ, but I don't need it. Um, and I try not to want too much. And I have found that there were some times in my life when I had the least, but I was the happiest. It was like, I had exercise, the beach, playing my guitar, didn't have cable or anything like that, and just lived a very, very simple life. And, Sometimes I know, like, I'm just different, but, sometimes when, like, my wife or daughter, when they're like, I want, like, I get like this, because I'm not a person who wants a lot. And I think I don't know, I think there's something powerful to not want. Um, but I don't know if I haven't figured out how to use it to my advantage, I guess you could say. Other than, I mean, I can walk away from things, especially even
You-
here
You're not
lately.
you're not beholden to anything else if you don't want or you don't have wants or needs. I mean, there's needs, like basic
Yeah.
needs, right? But like you're not beholden to somebody else if there is no wants, or
And
something.
I don't know if it's healthy, I mean, because want, want can translate into drive, and drive can translate into success. And so, if you, yeah, I don't know. I, I don't know if that's healthy. I haven't decided. I think it could be either. I think it's how you use it, you know, because I still have to have that drive and consistency and XYZ if you want to be an entrepreneur. Um,
I maybe it's more like this. It's like when I say the word wants, maybe I'm just saying consume. Like I don't want to be I don't want to consume at this like super high rate. There's no reason for it. You know what I mean? When you consume like that, when you're wrapped up in so many wants of being a consumer, then it takes away from it's like we have access to so many things and we have no time. Well, we have no time because we're doing all these other little silly things.
that's what it makes me think of when you just said that, like, so much. I was like thinking of scrolling, like,
Yeah.
TikTok. It's like, because, okay, yeah, you got music. Maybe you like see sneakers, favorite band. Next thing is somebody's selling a supplement. You take some Shilajit or something. I don't know. It'd be like, hey, I want that. I want that. I want that. um, for me, it's more like I'll save that and go back later. Maybe I'll consider it, type of a thing. But I just try not to. But that's why I always say, like, that I thought I would be okay being homeless. Not that I want to be, but
I don't want to be homeless either. I also don't want anybody to be homeless. It's one of the first things that my daughter noticed when we first started driving in a car. We would go and she'd be in her car seat, and when she could first speak,
yeah,
she'd be like, "Daddy, who's that?" And I'd be like, "Well, that's a homeless person." And she would say, like, "What do you mean?" And I'd be like, "Well, they don't have a house. Like we have a house, they don't have a house." And she would be like, "That's really sad." And I was like, "Yeah, it really is." You know what I mean? And like it's like the mouth of babes, right? Like, it really made me think about who I want to be. Well, she does that a lot with me where she'll say things and I was like, man, I want her to see me as the kind of person that would do something about these types of things or speak up about these things or if I had influence or something that I could help do
right.
those things because that's what we want her to do, and so I don't know, I don't that was just like a tangent. I just
Did
said
you?
that.
No, no,
Sorry.
no, no. It kind of leads into a couple of things, but do you think that one, I mean, there's always that like the one time I was talking to Marcel and I'd just gotten off the phone with him and my daughter came in and was like, "Who's that?" And I had to explain to her and deciding if it was appropriate to tell her the story. And, you know, I think like homeless, that's kind of a one thing, like they don't have a home. But in terms of her level of comprehension, how I don't know. I mean I kinda know what I'm trying to ask and kinda um I mean, did she kind of comprehend? Did she ask why they don't have a home?
She didn't, but she always she asks questions all the time.
Hmm.
I mean, she doesn't ever not ask. She's constantly asking questions, and I really try really hard to answer them as genuinely as I possibly can for the appropriate age that she is, right? But I try to be like
Yeah.
real straight up. I try to be as close to it's I say the truth, but it's just like,
Yes.
I just don't want her to have to go through the conversation of, stuff that just she's just not ready for. But I want her to know, that person is homeless. What does that mean? I'm not going to say, well, he's just holding a sign because, he's
Well, it
selling
makes me
houses
think of it
or
makes me
whatever.
think of we were driving over to Huntsville one time. Our oldest daughter had a soccer game when she was still in high school, and so my daughter was younger, as we're talking about age appropriate. And for for any of you who don't know, Huntsville, Texas is home to Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And as we're going by the soccer field, we're passing one of the smaller units, and they're all out on the yard in their jumpsuits. And my daughter, man, so this had to be like 5 years ago, so she was probably 5 or 6, and she's like, "Hey, like, what are all these people there? Why are they there?" Because there's barbed wire, or I don't know how much she noticed, but all these guys, and my wife's like, "Oh, they're like exercising, taking a break or something. Like that's a school or something. I don't know." But I just thought I was like, "Oh my gosh," because we had no idea. We're like, we're just going to a soccer game, and everything's down there, but when you're on 45, you see the main prison, but we went off of 45, and I didn't know that there was a other unit over there. And I was like, oh shit. But yeah, thinking about um the appropriate, how to age appropriate and what to tell them. But I had thought that, living in Austin, working at Brack and dealing with the homeless quite a bit. And my wife worked at Seton Northwest. And so my wife, um, sometimes we'd go out and go downtown, and she would be very empathetic towards some of the homeless. And, you know, there would be times that maybe with her, I would be more like, I get it, but like this person was just in the ER metabolizing to freedom 2 nights ago. He's a belligerent drunk and would probably assault you if he wasn't trying to get money from you. Um, so I know as your daughter progresses, with Austin kind of being that way, Um, how has that been? Has it changed any as the homelessness in Austin improved, or
I think that I mean, I think it's changed, but I don't know if it's gotten better, if that
yeah?
makes sense. You
Because
know what I mean?
I'm
I mean, it's
thinking
just
as
like,
she evolves and you explain more to that, because like you said, you would love to be able to have influence to stand up for issues like this, things that you believe in.
yeah, I I don't want to ask her to do anything I wouldn't do.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And I want to support. I want to. I want to be as supportive as I can to all the positive ideas she can, because the world's kind of gonna kind of beat it out of her. You know what I mean? Like, the world can be tough sometimes, and so I want her to hold on to these great ideas. And I think it's important for me to support that and show that as a dad and a person, and as a, the leadership position I'm in the sense of, like, inside of my family, my
yeah.
clients, and those things.
No, I 100%, because my daughter, when I'm gone one day, she'll always have these episodes to come back and listen to. Um, but we we didn't listen to our parents probably the way we should have.
Yeah, but my
Our
parents
kid,
weren't podcasting.
yeah. Well, the other thing though is I always say that, hey, she won't listen. She may not listen to me, but you know they imitate. emulate. And so trying to be the example, going to the gym, doing this, uh, I feel like that's kind of one of the most important things I can do for her is just kind of set the example. But are you are, are you going to homeschool or are you going to do public school or private school when she
We
gets ready to?
we haven't really decided yet. I think she's going to end up going to public school.
Hmm.
You know, I'm a really big proponent of, I guess, my mom was a teacher. Both my parents have been teachers at different times. My dad was also, and my dad's just a teacher at his core, in general,
Yeah,
right? And so, I understand how important it is that, if she does well, it'll be because we're involved, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Involved with her learning process and like making sure that she doesn't fall behind because ultimately, she's our responsibility. She's not the school's responsibility. And
yeah,
she has such an interest for things outside of school, like regular school, that I want to make sure that we're growing those things like too, you know what I mean? So that might change her path a little bit. So, and and you just never know. Like you never know what school is going to be.
yeah.
It,
I saw this
the
thing on
fact.
Threads
Yeah, go
today.
ahead.
Somebody said, instead of saying "How was your day" when you pick your daughter up, say "What would you learn today?" Of course, I forgot about it whenever I picked my daughter up today, but um, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about. What did you learn? Um, I guess because good could mean many things, you know, or it
I was
doesn't
trying to
open
think
up
of.
a conversation. I guess.
I guess I always ask her how her day went. I was like, "How'd your day go?" But she always goes, "Good." I go, "Did you?" I go, "What'd you learn today?" She goes, I don't know." But that's the way I used to do my parents too. I used to go. I went to church like by myself. My parents didn't go to church, so like they would drop
Really?
me off at yeah, they would drop me off at church and then pick me up, and my dad would be like, "Well, what'd you learn today?" And I'd be like, I don't know. I just wanted to go to church because my friends were there." You know what I
Okay.
mean? So
Well,
it's
no, yeah, I gotta explore this a little bit. So you, so growing up, your parents didn't go to church. Did you have any religious background, or was it like we're Baptist? Like we didn't go to church, but dad's Baptist, mom's Catholic.
so
So,
my mom was Church of Christ
mhm,
and my dad was Catholic,
okay,
and um there was opportunities to go to church where I was from. They just didn't. I don't know. It just wasn't part of their repertoire. I think that both of them, in their own unique way, were kind of over the church. Maybe I'm kind of speaking out of turn. I don't know if that's true, but I will say this. Church of Christ is kind of wild, and so is Catholic Church as well.
yeah,
And so, I mean, I am baptized. I guess that's whatever you call it.
mhm,
I'm Methodist. That's where I got. Is it what do you call it when you get?
baptized.
Is it baptized? Okay,
Well,
I
yeah, I
didn't know if
think,
that just.
or I mean, I know in Catholicism they have like catechism and confirmation and stuff like that, which I
Now
never
this is
did.
more like I was like I want to be Methodist, and they're like cool, you're gonna have to do this thing, and I was like okay, and so then I did it. You know what
How,
I mean?
why, how'd you come to the decision of Methodist?
Because that's where all my friends were. Did you not begin with the beginning of the
Yeah,
story?
I
I mean,
remember that. But I'm kind of going backwards to go, um, prior to that, did you have concept of God? Did you believe in God
like
like
I would
growing
go,
up?
we would go to church. Like the Church of Christ was like right down the street from my house, so we'd go
Mm-hmm.
like every once in a while. And then I would go to like Sunday school, like Bible school week,
Yeah.
like things like that. But then like slowly, I would get invited to go to this church where a lot of my friends went and things like that, and they would have all these events and things like that. And then they would have stuff on like Wednesdays, and so just I just started going there, and anybody I guess could really go.
Right.
But that's where I went, and so man, I haven't thought about this in a long time, but like that was probably a lot more influential than I thought it was because of just the kids that were there and the kids I made friends with, and and wanting to go do something like that, it was probably a lot more powerful than I thought.
So you say influential in a good way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think my high school art teacher was also the like Sunday school teacher,
Hmm.
and so that had a big impact on me. And I sang in the choir at that church, and I really liked music, and
Oh
so
wow.
you know stuff like just stuff like that. So I think it gave me maybe a more sense of community than maybe I was used to or really had at school, or does that
How
make
many
sense?
people? How many people were in your town?
It's funny you asked. I just looked this up today. In 1992, there were 5,700 and like 39, I think, or something like that.
In my town, 93 when I graduated, 868 maybe.
Yeah, it's so small.
So when so I asked these questions. Part of these, sorry, part of these questions, um, also arrive from one Texas small town and what it's like, and when everybody knows everybody, and so I definitely get that part of, um, how hey, my friends are there. That's where I'm going because here it would be like, I got burned bad as a child, and spent a lot of time in this burn unit, and they thought I was going to die, and so they allowed me to be baptized Catholic because I don't guess you're allowed to unless you take the classes or whatever. And um so it was, there's many churches, and sometimes you would attend different ones because it was kind of, that's where everybody went, and it's a small town, and you can walk from football practice down to the church for whatever they're having. And I think, like, for me, I knew there was Catholic and Baptist, Southern Baptist, being in a small town in Texas, but I never really paid attention to, like, oh, this is Methodist, this is Church of Christ, or this is whatever. Kind of like what you said, hey, it was wherever the friends were going, and that's what we did. Um, but I've talked about it in solo episodes of my journey, in that, I don't know, I guess I always felt like I knew there was something more. Um, and, I think because you would go to these different churches because friends were there or whatever. And I remember one of the pastors coming to my house and, talking to my mom about being saved and getting baptized. And she's like, well, he was already baptized Catholic. And, you know, I was pretty young. She's like, when he's old enough to make educated, intelligent decisions about religion on his own, then he can choose. So, no, you can't baptize him. But, for me, I always felt like there was, I always felt like I knew, whether, my parents never forced church on me and they didn't go because, you know, in a small town, even in the late 60s, early 70s, that's probably 70s when they got together, you know, just a Mexican and a white was a big deal. My grandfather did not want my dad, you know, anybody with long hair, and what do they say? Anybody with long hair and he, my grandfather, he was like, you know, he basically saying they're queer or whatever. But they never forced anything on me. But I felt like I always knew something. And um, when I went in the Navy, get your dog tags, you say whatever you are, you know, and probably, you know, we would go to church at boot camp because that was an opportunity. Otherwise you're going to be back in the barracks, cleaning. So it was just better to go to church. But it was actually good there. And then my dad also ran boys' homes when I was a teen. And so I would often be there because it was like this huge ranch with cottages, tennis courts, all stuff. But I would go to church with them as well. And then, I guess I felt like, I don't know. At some point in time in my life, I had done something so terrible and felt like I could never be forgiven that even though I felt like I believed, I didn't live as if I believed because I felt like I could never be forgiven. So I just kind of lived recklessly. Um, but, much of that has changed. And I don't know what you call it. You can call it spiritual, you can call it whatever. I always say it's like water. We all call it something different, but we all need it. We all know what it is. Um, so I look back at kind of what your experiences is and kind of what I know of you and who you are and how you approach things. What is your kind of relationship with spirituality or faith or universe, God, whatever you want to call it?
Um, you know, I would like to fancy myself as a son of God,
Hmm.
but ultimately, in my opinion, when we're talking about God, we're talking about the universe, we're talking about the universal truth of how we're supposed to treat people and how we're supposed to act and interact and things like that. And so it's all the same. So I don't ever I don't ever really talk about religion or God like a lot or super openly, not because I have any shame or anything like that, but it's the way I choose to live. And so I remember that I didn't have a lot of faith. Um, this is the reintroducing of my faith has happened in the last, let's say, like 5-ish years or something like that.
Me too.
And so I and so I had this friend, and we became like really good friends. And I remember one day I was looking at his phone, and it's like his screen on his phone was like a cross with like some sort of like maybe for Easter or something like that or whatever. And I remember thinking like, wow, that's strange. We never talked about God before or anything like that, but like he feels strongly enough about it that he put a cross on his screensaver. And so then, excuse me, I asked him. I said, "Hey man, like are you a pretty religious person?" And he was like, "Yeah." He was like, "I like to go to church and I read my Bible and like stuff like that." But he had never like mentioned it to me. And so then, you fast forward and my life is kind of falling apart inside of like my divorce that's like happening and just like other stuff that it's just
Hmm.
this big change that's fixing to shift. And when I wanted to tap back into that, he was the first person I called, and he welcomed me with open arms, and he was like, "However, I can be here for you," and stuff like that. And that's really, what really turned me back on to religion. Now, that is really hard to find, someone like that. And so, I try to be that same person when I go out into the world that, like, people kind of, you know, I don't want to say question my intentions, but you know, they they feel the impact of what it truly means to be a good person, a good Christian without me having to say it out loud.
Yeah. And I think like with me, part of a significant part is, as I had explained before, in such a small town with so many churches, the hypocrisy of, for me, it was like, people would question you if you didn't go to church or whatever. But it's like, these same people who were showing up on Sunday morning were the same people out drinking beer in the pasture party and probably fornicating. And it's like, okay, look, like I don't have to go to church to prove to you anything. My relationship is my relationship. Um, but that was kind of one of those things that was very I just didn't feel like the outward display of having to do it meant I felt like that's what people placed importance on versus the actual belief, if you will. And, sometimes I feel the world is similar, you know, um, and all about what you what you see. But yeah, kind of like what you said, it's about going out and just being that example. And I had one today that was super impressive, actually. And I was picking up pizza, and I'd placed an online order. And when I went to get my 2 liter, they didn't have the flavor. They were wiped out. And the lady's like, "Oh, what flavor would you like?" She just saw me looking, and she went to the back, and she could have got me one off the shelf, but she got me a cold, fresh 2 liter of what I wanted. And I was just like, it was something so small, but for whatever reason, I just felt so grateful, and I was just so impressed um, by something so simple. And I asked myself, because I had considered making a post going, hey, like I just had an incredible interaction with somebody who did more, I guess, than was expected. But is it because it's so hard to find because people are less kind? Or do I have that perception because also, whether it's Ubering or even as a customer, you go into some places and they want to give you the bare minimum. They're not going to go to the back and look for you anything, much less a cold one, And so I'm like, is it just less common in the world? Is that why it's so noticeable? Um, yeah, I don't know. What do you
I just
think?
think it's not going to happen everywhere.
Yeah,
But if you're busy worried about the times it doesn't happen, then you're not present for the times that it does, and that's like the difference, right? And so it's like, does everything always go my way? Hell no. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's crazy. Nothing's gonna always go my way, but when I don't get caught up in the things that don't go my way and I'm able to stay present in the next moment, something could go my way. And so then, you know, I think about what you said, where it's like, something really good happens and you want to do like a congratulation post in a sense of like, hey, I want to really talk. I want to show
celebrate.
how, yeah, celebrate, right? But for me, in my world, they kind of happen so fast and so often. I don't have time to like make posts about it.
That's
You
awesome
know what I
that they
mean?
happen so fast and so awesome.
Well, but they're little bitty, and then they're
Moments.
big, and then I mean there's just all these in between, and it can be as simple as, like, I'm making this up, but like getting my favorite parking spot at the gym.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And if I'm caught up in some fight I had with my girlfriend, then you know, maybe I get there later and it's not there, or what, you know what I mean? Like, it's just a matter of like just, staying in the moment of what's being given to me at that moment. And then you have more really good moments because you're a lot more present for what they really are sometimes, even when
You
they
just said
suck.
you just said a word I was gonna circle back to because you said it before, and I wanted to ask you how um how do you maintain presence? How good are you at it? How did you get there? And how did you overcome not being present? And kind of what does that mean to you? I mean, I know like there's certain things like I know just from knowing you with the phones and your family and stuff like that. So yeah, give us a
Well,
presence lesson.
there's a really great book. It's by John Kabat-Zinn, and the book is called Wherever You Go, There You Are. Um, and the book is he wrote a book. Let's see, I can't remember the order. I think he wrote Full Catastrophe Living before this book, or maybe it was after. I might be making that up. But Full Catastrophe Living is about um, how to meditate. It's a how-to manual of how to meditate. That's what that book is, right? But Wherever You Go, There You Are is a book about what meditation really is. And so I was already doing all these meditative practices that I didn't really realize that I was doing. You know what I mean? And finding ways to be present with myself like every single day in like little short periods of time or longer periods of time. So it might be set aside or it might be like, 20 seconds at a stoplight. But those things add up, you know what I mean? And when you're able to kind of, you know, when you're able to get yourself into that mode easier, you're able to get yourself into that mode when things aren't going well. Take a step back, you know. I'm trying to think of.
How do you do that? How do you? Because I know exactly, and I I try to mind fuck the trick out of myself however I can. I'll take any tip of like when it's fucking going down and you're like, oh man, I'm about to fucking spiral. I had a moment today when I got home and it was just like the energy in the house was just fucking off. And, sometimes, three women in the house. Um,
That's
and
just that's just I have two women in my house, so
I
yeah,
had to go for a walk. I went and took a little nature walk and thought it through and listened to a podcast and you
so
know,
so so you did essentially what you did is kind of what they could call like a walking meditation, right?
yeah,
So you go and you're with yourself. Like you have this podcast, but I'm sure that you were probably halfway listening to podcasts and halfway just thinking about things and all
yes,
this other
sir.
stuff, right? And so those are times where you're like choosing
I
to
even turned
be
it off
with
for
your
a moment and went in silence.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? So like yeah, so you're already like doing it, but the practice comes, can you do it like kind in a weird this way, can you do it all the time? Like can you
Well, and the other part
always
for me is, can I do it without necessarily, because you can't always go for a walk, but I also have this previous pattern of, I wouldn't say running away, but removing myself from a situation. Because I've always told my wife and my daughter, or mostly my daughter, like, if I take a backpack, if I take my guitars, there's a few items that if I'm gone forever, these are the items that I'll take. I told her I'm always coming back, but it's that sometimes I have to get out and go for a ride. I go to the dam and listen to the water over the spillway and park in nature and do stuff like that. And so, but my thing specifically to me, because I know sometimes it's a pain point for my daughter and my wife, is that flight, the feel like I need to flight. So, you know, finding some sort of mind shift in being still, being present, that's where I need the work.
well, I think it weirdly comes with a lot of trust, especially when you're dealing with other people,
Yeah,
right? Of like the kind of things that you need and who you are and understanding who that person is and stuff like that. And so, when
that
when
makes sense.
interacting with another person, I mean, we're in a whole that's a whole different conversation,
Yeah,
right?
but
You
my
know what I'm
wife and
saying?
I, we hit 19 years on April 1. So
Congratulations.
thank you. A lot of hard work, a lot of forgiveness, a
Oh
lot of
yeah, I
love.
bet.
But,
100%.
but I think, what you said kind of really keyed in of she understands that about me. And so I feel kind of less guilty. Um, and then being able, my daughter being in an age where I could explain to her, like, hey, look, daddy's not leaving. Daddy just, when I have a tough time, I have to step away for a moment. And sometimes I just go to the gym because it's 24 hours and it's, 5 miles from the house. Um, but yeah, her knowing that and kind of giving me the space to do that is, I'm certainly grateful for it.
It's
Um,
amazing.
but yeah, I would like to improve of finding a different way, I guess you could say, when I kind of get flustered and need to pivot or need to think things through. I'm a big journaler. That works sometimes, but yeah, I don't know. What do you what do you do when you get flustered? Do you have like a specific kind of technique, a question you ask yourself?
Man, I can't remember. I mean, when I think of fluster now, like there's so little response out of me physically. You know what I mean? Maybe I don't, maybe I'm not, I can't see my own face, so maybe it's on my face. But like now, excuse me, now like whenever I get flustered, I usually remove myself in like some manner. But the thing about like removing yourself, like you were talking about like going on a walk, stuff like that. Like you don't want to set it up as kind of this victim thing. You want to
Yeah,
set like a really hard boundary, a lot of communication around it, and go, this is I'm asking for something that I need. I need you to be understanding about that and trust that what I'm telling you is true, and trust that like if you give me this thing I need, I can be better for you,
yeah.
and not like, hey, I know you don't like it when I don't let you talk about things, so I'm going to leave so I can hold you hostage to to my own shit. Like, you know what I mean? That's a totally different thing. And I think you really have to be real with yourself about what you're really doing, because your partner or the person you're interacting with knows. They might not be able to say it out loud and they can't prove it, but they can feel it. And that's a big thing, you know what I mean? Like I especially like, again, going back to my daughter, I what she feels and understands from me is what she's going to know, because we base a lot of things on like what we feel and
Mm-hmm.
what we think about those feelings and stuff like that. And so
Mm.
I just want her to feel like that she can communicate with me, that I'm safe, that I will always be here to support her. We can always work through everything. Those are the things I want her to know. I also wanted to know that like, hey, if you mess up, there's consequences. Like, and there might not necessarily be my consequences. It might
Right.
be life's or somebody else's, and so like you have to be aware of that, like too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things I think I've, what I was talking about with kind of the my flight response, you know, but of course being able to look back and go, look, I'm not going anywhere if I didn't take anything. So don't worry about it. But, I've learned so much of this about me over the past couple of years, and, being able to have those moments with my daughter now that she's age appropriate and can understand and be able to tell her that, um, you know, she gets it. And that, I don't know, that certainly, I don't know. I kind of lost my train of thought, but
So,
um, yeah, I don't know. Something, something happened there. Fucked me up. Whatever I was thinking about. Ah, man. Um, what's something you had to learn? I mean, unlearn along the way to become the person you are today? And when I ask this, do you feel like you're aligned where you want to be?
I had to, you know, the people that raise you, whoever those people are, it could be your parents, it could be your grandparents, it could be strangers, you could be adopted, whatever, whatever it is. But they have impact and influence, because I mean, whether they want to or not, they're teaching you how to live life in this weird way. You know what I mean? And even when they're not participating, they're still teaching you something about life. And so, whereas my parents gave me this really great childhood, you know, I'm now I'm now gonna be 50 soon, and
Uh,
so like like I got this. You know what I mean? I don't have to be beholden to those ideas. I can have my own ideas and my new things, and I can change and be better and stuff like that. So I had to let go of a lot of the things that I thought were right or absolutes or just important that really aren't. You know,
did
they're really not important. You know,
did anything come from did you did any of the insight come from kind of connecting the dots of my dots are like my mom, my grandparents, like everybody's pushed down some sort of belief, baloney, something that, I realize at 48 is no. And this is maybe this was the way the family was. This is the way the family is, but this is the way want the family to be. And I want to break some of these.
generational curses.
Yes. And part of it too, and I had made a note of this. It was interesting. Part of it is this. Oh, give me this note. I gotta have this note. Um, I was thinking about it while I was driving, and ah, yes, you're about to be 50. I'm about to be 49. And I even got a little kind of bad joke on this. Was the other day I'm watching like Entertainment Tonight or TMZ or something, and they're like, "Oh, George Clooney's doing a special on Broadway or some crap," and Monica Lewinsky was there, in the crowd in the audience with her children and husband, and you go in the article and um, brings up Monica Lewinsky, and it's like at that time of the incident, uh, Bill Clinton was 49,
Dang.
and I was sitting there going, Richard, you're 48, about to be 49. What the fuck have you done with your life? This dude at 49 was in the Oval Office making poor decisions.
See,
Uh,
what he wasn't ready. I'm
but
just kidding.
hey, but if you had to be married to Hillary, no, there's no telling what decisions you would make. But what this relates to is kind of getting back on the track was I was thinking about the 80s and 90s and growing up there and both of us being fathers and of daughters and how different the world was and the concerns we had and we could just go out all day and just come home when it was dark. But you think of all the beliefs and crap that were pushed down. And then you think about how our parents were raising us in this period that was is just kind of like, especially as boys, go out and just experiment. You build fires, you got a knife, you're carving sticks, and all the crap we did, especially in the country. I mean, so, so different. And, now we're, you know, 48 years old in this digital age, we're raising a daughter um, with way different threats and concerns that we had, and I think part of the generational curses or traumas, they just come from there was just less information. People didn't know all the stuff we know about everything, be it from, let's say, marijuana to steroids to, anything. And so it's like, I mean, yeah, I feel like if we, you know, not dead or in prison, not too far off track. So all things considered, it wasn't necessarily terrible, but I think of the difference. There's certainly a different level of awareness within myself. I think within this time frame as it relates to the world and what we're trying to do for our children as parents and not push generations of kind of traumas and curses down.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of, I feel like, what the focus has been on lately. But what do you got going on into the future as you progress? What is on the horizon for Scotty G in terms of podcast coaching, how you're approaching raising your child and your relationship?
Well, as far as my personal business, um, you know, it just in this weird way, it just keeps getting better because it just keeps getting more true to like, who I am. And as far as like the podcast and like doing stuff like that, I'm starting a series in here called Little Garage, which is a lot like Tiny Desk.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll be bringing bands in and just musical guests, and we'll be doing like these little mini concerts and stuff like that. So that's like really cool. And then, I do the thing called mixtape therapy,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's a music media podcast in which me and a girl named Hannah, she's a therapist. We take like songs and media and things, and we listen to it and intake it, and then we talk about like how it impacted us, and we bring on extra guests. And so that's really led me and Hannah to think about that. I think we're going to work on a relationship book. So we have a kind of a relationship book in the works, and then we eventually want to turn that into like a workshop so that people and couples can have good communication,
Yeah.
and have like good relationships, and not have such mixed communication. So yeah, so like that's a lot of the stuff that like is like that's what I'm pointing my ship towards. But you never know. You never know what might jump in front of me that is, excuse me, allows me to make a bigger impact or do something different,
Yeah.
or whatever. So like I'm always open to stuff. I'm
Yeah.
I have my ideas, but I'm always open to slight changes. I think it's important.
Man. Yeah, no, I agree. And sometimes you take off on one path and it shows you another, and sometimes you got to go back to the other path. But it's like, where do you find the time to do all this and be a dad
Well,
and a partner?
I record podcasts from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. That's I do a lot of stuff when my daughter's at school. I don't scroll a lot on social media. I don't
Mm-hmm.
watch a lot of TV shows. Um, and like, you know, I know we all kind of say that, and I know that like, like I do watch TV, but it's so sparingly. I just don't, it's more of it fills time when I'm like eating dinner, or like, like
Yeah.
just a little bit of downtime before bed. There's no series that I'm watching or stuff like that. Like I'm too focused on doing this creative stuff because I just I don't know. I find more value in me as a human being working on this stuff than I ever have like binge watching some show. And I binge watch like history. So it's
Yeah.
not like I'm not, or like,
Yeah.
autobiographies, or, so it's not like I'm not even not learning stuff, but it's just like I just benefit so more, when you're editing a
It's less about the entertainment and more about the value of the content.
yeah, like when I do a podcast episode,
Mm-hmm.
before I put it out, I've seen it probably four times at a minimum. I've watched it four times. You know what I mean? The raw, and then re-editing it if someone has a
Mm-hmm.
point with the raw, and then I'll probably watch it again to make sure everything's like good. And then once I post it, I'll listen to it or watch it like one more time, and that's it. And then I never really watch it again. I never listen to it again. I never watch it again after that, right? And so like you really start to hear a lot about yourself, and I'm hearing that with my ears. And so, you know, it really, there's an investment into me, you know, and like I remember I was editing an episode today, and I record like 6 months out. So like all my stuff's like,
Right.
and I've changed a little bit in that period of time too. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
sometimes it's a little cringy. I'll go back and I'll go, oh, I can't believe I said that. You know what I mean? Because I see it a little bit differently at this moment. You know what I mean? But that's just part of growth, and that's good. It's good
Yeah.
that like I look at that and I go, man, I've changed my mind about that, and that's a good thing.
The
You
fact
know
that
what I
you're
mean? Like,
aware is
yeah,
beyond
you know what I mean?
most
So
of society.
well, I feel like that's my responsibility.
Yeah.
It's my responsibility to be aware of my stuff and not have it impact you unless it's positive or you want it to. You know what I mean? Like that's my responsibility as a human being, I feel like. Um, but I don't feel guilty for being who I am and how I handle it, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I
Man,
feel
you,
like I handle it well. I feel like I try really hard to treat people well. I try to show up as the person I would want to meet. I try to do all those things. And so when I have like a bad interaction, if I start to have too many in a row, then I start to go, okay, like what's up? Like, is it you? Is
yeah.
it like what's going on? You know what I mean? But like, I don't have that a lot. So like, I just chalk them up as like, well, that one just kind of sucked, but I don't, I don't think there's anything there other than these just two people didn't connect. And it's like when you accidentally run into somebody. You know what I mean? It's like no one's like when you accidentally run into somebody like in Europe, like they don't even say excuse me. They just like keep going because it's such a non. They just accepted like, oh, that's just an accident. We don't have
When
to even bring it up.
you were in
It's only here in
Europe,
the United States that we do stuff like that.
you were in Europe recently, were you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Where'd you go?
I was in Hungary. My mentor lives in Budapest.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that. How was that?
It was good. This past time we went in the winter time, so it was cold. And I got sick on the trip, so I
Oh,
wasn't feeling well part of the days. And then we went to Rome, and I wasn't feeling well when we were in Rome, and so that
so you
part
weren't
was
doing
rough.
as Romans do.
I mean, I
'Cause they
was
were
I was
feeling well.
trying, but it was not going well at all.
um, did you did you see, learn, or meet anyone that made an impact that was noticeable?
I read this quote today that said, "A smart man knows that he can learn something from a fool." And
Mm.
so I really don't ever go out into the world without the expectation that I could be impacted or learn or see
Mm-hmm.
something different or new or taking something differently. It's really like it's my full approach, but then that's I feel like I'm living life as full as I possibly can when I do that. But that's something I'm choosing to see. I'm
Yeah.
making a conscious choice to see things in that way, just in the way people make a conscious choice to see things in another way or see things the way they want to see them versus seeing the way they really are. And not in a thing of like that what you feel or think can't have truth for you, but it doesn't mean necessarily it has truth to the rest of the world.
You travel offers a lot of opportunities, I feel like, for learning. Having been in the military and traveled some, and conversations especially. But it's always that kind of, yeah, I don't know. You realize they're human just like you. They probably have the same fears, some people, same concerns, going through the same stuff. Um,
Well, you were talking about earlier about like what I learned from the podcast and like stuff like that. Like when you when you have complete strangers in your home or you have people that have never been on a podcast before or you have people that they think they want to be on a podcast but they didn't know what the whole thing was going to kind of be about, then you really start to learn that like, oh, like there's all these people with similar insecurities because I also don't know what I'm doing as I do this podcast over here. I'm just figuring it out. You know what I mean? And I think that that has been a another side benefit to like, just everybody is human. And like, like it's weird because people will come and do my podcast that have never been on a podcast before and they just
Mm-hmm.
assume this is how it's done. And I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know how it's
This is how
done.
it's done here.
This is how it's done here, right?
Yeah.
And and I've done a lot of podcasts online,
Yeah.
but I've only done a few in person somewhere other than here. And everyone I've went to has been different than what I do here. But I just did what I did here, and so it's a really weird thing when someone goes like, "Wow, this is so cool! I didn't know this is what a podcast was like." I was like, "Well, don't necessarily. I don't know.
I'm gonna
Like, you
have
know
to
what I mean?
check
Like,
out some of the episodes you were on in person somewhere. Were they video?
yeah. There, I was on. It's called the Social 333 podcast out of Dallas.
Uh-huh. I'll check it out.
And then trying to think, but I think there's like one more, but it hasn't been like a lot, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
a lot of podcasts now they're online, you know what I mean? You came down here to do
Yeah.
like this, but a lot of stuff's online, but like I can't I can't really do what I do online. It doesn't. I like
Yeah.
interviewing people online because it stretches, my
Yeah.
audience and
Yeah.
it stretches me. But like I can't do the magic of what happens in here. And it's. I mean, I've had people record online and record in here, and they even say it's a difference. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah. Yeah. For me, I think like I mean, you know, this is what I have at the moment, but ultimately I would like something like you or a office space or I have 12 acres. I would actually, like maybe a shipping container off to the side of the house or something. Um, I'm looking at stuff like that down the road, but of course, that's I'm just, you know, at episode 119 just chugging along. I consider it kind of like a marathon pace and really thinking of it in that way, the end of July will be 2 years of podcasting, which is crazy because I probably didn't even, well, maybe I knew. I don't know. It's just weird to think like, oh, you've been doing this that long. Um, but yeah, I just want to keep enjoying it and keep progressing and have something like you, um, to where I could start having in-person guests. But I just listened to a episode could be a potential guest for you in person, maybe. Um, Ian Bick, locked in. There was a guy out of Dallas, out of Hurst.
Ah,
So not a far drive, but he was like in a motorcycle accident. He was a corrections officer. He did something else, and then he had a motorcycle accident and ended up like with a brachial plexus injury. That led to an amputation of his arm, but also led
oh
to
wow.
a fentanyl addiction.
Oh
And
wow.
he went to rehab and ended up um, he's in I think he just finished his first year or something of getting his LCDC to work at the treatment center in Mansfield that he actually went to.
That's cool.
So, and he works at a smoke shop, but he actually went to Connecticut in person for Ian Bix. So I'm sure he'd come to Austin.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
But yeah,
definitely.
yeah. But yeah, that's what I want to do. I mean, just keep connecting, keep going, And like I say, my ultimate goal is my daughter's in an art school, and then she goes in the sixth grade next year. Her school only goes till eighth, and instead of sending her to high school, I would like to have the podcast in a place I could get a conversion van, and her and I drive around all 50 states, maybe even Canada, as long as they don't tariff us, and interview people and just let her see and meet. And, she taught me how to use CapCut, so let her be my editor manager. I don't know whatever she wants to do. She might want to do something creative. I mean, she goes to
Yeah.
an art school. They do all kinds of stuff, and so yeah, but that's what I'm thinking about. But all right. As we wrap it up, what do you want to leave the listeners with?
Well, I think, you know, I don't know if me and you talked about this. I think we talked about this, but you know, your own self awareness can do so much for your life. You know what I mean? Like just really being aware of what you're really doing, what you're really not doing, taking ownership for that, right? And then trying to work on those things to become better, recognizing that they're not as good as they want to. And I think a lot of times we just kind of we want to ignore those things or pretend like they don't exist and stuff like that. And that's like, you know, in my little world, that's not living authentically. You know what I mean? And then when you ask people to adjust to that in authenticity, it doesn't feel right to them because they're like, why would I do that for you when I don't feel like you're being an authentic person to me? Even so, even when I'm having my worst days, I don't have to be an asshole, but I can be authentic about like that I'm not having a great day and this is not a great time and that we shouldn't do
Yeah,
this or whatever else it is. And like that's allowing people to adjust to that and at the same time, try to be the best person you could be. And so yeah, I've said this kind of before that my girlfriend has issues with that shirt, but it really comes down to, you know, if you're being hopefully authentically you is a good person that lines up with God or the universe or whatever you want to call that. And if you're doing that, it's not a hard adjustment. I would like to think that no one has to work really hard to adjust to me. That would make me happy.
yeah, it's so true because the other day, I mean, Marcel and I were gonna hop on, and he just wasn't having a good day, and he told me, and I adjusted. And really, at that point, for me, it's less about this and more about how are you? How are you okay as a person? You know.
100%.
Um, but that's how I feel. And but speaking of authenticity and all that, I just want to say thank you for interviewing or for coming on the podcast. One and for the audience members who don't know, I just want to thank you for always being there and communicating. The audience doesn't know I reach out to Scotty a lot. There's sometimes when I'm having a rough day and he's able to offer perspective. And so I appreciate you.
Well, man, I appreciate you having me. When we originally did the podcast, we did it in here, but it's in a weird way, it's cool to like come online and do this with you in the arena that you normally sit in. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate your kind words, and I've again, like I try not to preach things I don't do. So I try to show up for the people that are in my life and that carry weight in my life. I try to like check in, see how you're doing, stuff like that, because that's the kind of person that I would want someone to be for me.
I hope 10 years from now we're doing this in person in a one of our big ass studios
Yeah,
or
one
in
of
a
our cool
van.
ass our cool ass studios that we have. Yeah, we'll be doing,
Yes.
and one of us will be parking your van out front of my cool ass studio.
And make it a weekend with some fire, some dogs, some barbecue, and
Yeah,
just some music and I think love is the answer. Love is the undercurrent and we need more of it. If I could eliminate one thing, I would eliminate hate. But yeah, love's the answer and it's whether you speak the same language or not, we all understand it.
that's
Unfortunately,
right.
violence is a common universal language, but choose love is what I would say.
Choose love.
That's
That's
right,
right.
man. All right. I'll talk to you later, man.
Yeah, have a good one. See you soon. Bye,
Yes,
everyone.
sir. Bye to the audience. Good night.
Asteroid of fear.